All right. Let's dive into something pretty heavy this time.
Sounds good.
Imagine a 13-year-old kid,
Right.
like carrying around this like massive weight,
Yeah.
and then boom,
Yeah.
clock strikes a very specific time in the middle of the night. And this completely unexpected visitor shows up.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to unpack Patrick Ness's book on monster calls today. And this is something that you specifically asked for.
Yeah, a lot of requests for this one.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful story at its core
Okay.
about Conor O'Malley. He's this teenager dealing with his mom's really serious illness.
Okay.
And like the title totally gives it away.
Yeah.
One night, the yew tree from the churchyard, it like comes to life right outside his window
Oh, wow.
at exactly 12:07 a.m.
7 a.m. That's so specific.
Right.
It's like a crack in reality or something.
Yeah, it's like all of Conor's anxieties, they have this appointment with the extraordinary.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's like this constant reminder that something big is happening, something beyond just normal everyday life.
Absolutely. And for you listening, wanting to understand this story like quickly but also deeply,
Yeah.
that specific time, it's like an early signal. We're
Like-
entering this space where the normal rules, they kind of bend a bit.
I see.
It's a space just for Conor to face these like deep, difficult emotions.
Okay, so let's start with Conor himself,
Huh.
13 years old. His mom's battling cancer.
Yeah.
And, one thing that really stood out to me from the book was how intensely it focuses on all those feelings and anxieties that come before a potential loss.
Right.
That anticipatory grief, that not knowing what's going to happen. It's something you don't always see explored with such honesty.
You're so right. So many stories about illness that kind of jump to the aftermath, the
Wow.
grieving process. But here, we're right there with Conor, like in the middle of the storm,
Yeah.
feeling that strain, that uncertainty.
And given his age, too, right?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. 13 years old.
Yeah.
And he's got this huge responsibility on his shoulders, this like emotional burden that nobody really sees.
He really is carrying so much. The book talks about his anger, his loneliness, and then on top of all that, he's dealing with bullying at school, too, from this kid named Harry.
It's like life is just throwing everything it can at him.
It really feels that way.
Yeah.
But then this incredible thing happens.
What's that?
The monster arrives.
Okay.
This huge being made from the yew tree. And remember,
Yeah.
12:07 a.m.
Right on time.
It makes this unusual offer to Conor.
What's that?
The monster will tell Conor 3 stories, but in return, Conor has to tell his own 4th story, and it has to be the absolute truth.
Wow, that's a heavy deal.
It is. And what's so interesting is that Conor doesn't really freak out about this giant talking tree.
Yeah.
He's already facing this huge fear about his mother.
It's true.
So maybe this monster almost seems less scary.
Yeah, like a distraction almost.
Right. And Conor knows the monster wants to hear the story from his recurring nightmare.
Oh, yeah, that terrifying one.
Yeah. But that story, the truth buried inside it, that's the one he just can't bring himself to tell.
And the yew tree itself is super symbolic.
Okay.
Traditionally, it's linked to both death and healing.
Interesting.
So the fact that the monster comes from this tree suggests this duality, right?
Okay.
It embodies the pain and fear surrounding his mom's illness,
Right.
but also the potential for Conor to heal and grow emotionally.
I see. So the monster isn't just about death, it's also about the possibility of overcoming it.
Exactly. It's about Conor confronting the death of his old way of life so he can find a new path toward healing.
That's deep.
Yeah, this book goes there.
So let's talk about the people in Conor's life.
Oh.
Starting with his mom.
Okay.
She's fighting cancer, and it seems like she's trying so hard to be strong for Conor.
It's a natural instinct as a parent, right? You want to protect your child.
But the book shows how her trying to be strong actually makes it harder for Conor to cope.
Oh, I see, because he might feel like he has to be strong too.
Exactly. And then neither of them can really express their true feelings.
And that creates this unspoken guilt on both sides.
Right. She feels guilty about the burden she's placing on him,
Yeah.
and he feels guilty about having these negative emotions.
It's a tough situation all around.
Then there's Conor's grandmother.
Okay.
From what I gathered from the book, Conor really doesn't like her at first.
Oh, really?
She seems strict and kind of emotionally distant.
Yeah, that's definitely Conor's initial impression.
Right.
But as the story unfolds, we start to see her own sadness
Okay.
and how much she really cares for both Conor and her daughter.
And remember the first story the monster tells?
About the king and the queen.
Yeah. Conor actually sees his grandmother as the evil queen.
That's a powerful image.
It shows how our first impressions of people can be so wrong.
Absolutely. We often judge people based on limited information.
And then there's Conor's dad. who lives in America with a new family.
Right. He's pretty far removed physically.
And emotionally, too, it seems like he wants to be there for Conor, but he's just not equipped to provide the support Conor needs.
Yeah, that distance, both physical and emotional, really adds to Conor's sense of isolation.
For sure, he's going through this huge crisis practically alone.
Makes those feelings of loneliness even stronger.
There's also Lily Andrews, Conor's former best friend.
Okay.
Their relationship is kind of broken because she told people at school about his mom's illness.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's a real betrayal of trust.
But what's interesting is that Lily keeps trying to connect with Conor.
So maybe she still cares about him even though she hurt him.
It adds another layer of complexity to Conor's relationships, right?
It does.
And then we have Harry, the school bully.
Okay.
This might sound strange, but the book suggests that Harry bullying Conor actually provided a sense of normalcy for him.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Like in a world that's suddenly become unpredictable because of his mom's illness.
Yeah.
Being bullied was something Conor could count on.
Like a weird twisted kind of stability.
Right, but then Harry starts ignoring Conor completely.
And how did Conor react to that?
He totally loses it. He becomes violent.
Wow, so it's like being ignored made him feel even worse.
Exactly like he was invisible.
That's gotta be a painful feeling.
So let's go back to Conor's recurring nightmare.
The one with the wind and the darkness.
Yeah, he's in this darkness. There's this wind, and his mom is falling away from him, and he can't hold on.
It's such a vivid image of his fear of losing her.
And it also represents this truth that he's buried deep down.
Okay.
The truth that he doesn't want to face.
This nightmare is like the key to everything, isn't it?
I think so. It's what the monster's trying to unlock within Conor.
Yeah.
So then the monster starts telling his 3 stories.
Okay.
The first one about the king, the queen, and the prince.
Right.
It really challenges this idea that people are either all good or all bad.
It definitely complicates things.
And it connects to how Conor sees his grandmother, doesn't it?
It does. The story forces Conor and us as readers to consider that people aren't just black and white.
So we shouldn't judge people too quickly.
Exactly. Everyone has their own complexities, their own story.
Right.
And it's funny because Conor initially sees his grandmother as this, like, evil queen figure.
Yeah, he's got to learn that things are more nuanced than that.
The story is showing him that the world isn't a fairy tale.
I see.
And the second story, the one with the apothecary and the parson, yeah.
It shows that there aren't always easy answers, and sometimes a lack of faith can have serious consequences.
That's a tough lesson.
And it's right after hearing this story that Conor destroys his grandmother's living room.
Wow. That's intense.
It's like the monster story is giving Conor permission to express his anger.
Like an outlet for all that pent-up frustration.
Exactly. And the third story about the invisible man.
Okay.
That one really resonated with me because it connects to how Conor feels at school when Harry starts ignoring him.
Oh, I see. So he feels invisible too.
Exactly. And then he lashes out at Harry.
It's like he's desperate to be seen.
And while the book doesn't condone violence,
Of course not.
it does show how deeply Conor is hurting.
Right. He's acting out because he doesn't know how else to deal with these feelings.
While all this is happening, Conor's mom's health is getting worse, and she ends up in the hospital.
That must be so difficult for Conor.
It is, and it forces him to finally confront the truth that he's been avoiding.
The truth from his nightmare.
Exactly.
The one he couldn't tell.
So we come to the fourth tale, the one Conor has to tell.
And what happens?
He finally confesses that in his nightmare, he lets go of his mom's hand.
Oh, wow.
He admits that a part of him wants it all to end, even though he feels so guilty about it.
That's such a raw and painful admission.
It is.
Oh.
But it's the truth he's been hiding.
And what does a monster do?
The monster doesn't judge him.
Oh, good.
Instead, the monster helps Conor understand that it's okay to have these complicated feelings.
So the monster's role is to help Conor heal emotionally, not to magically cure his mom.
Exactly. And in those final moments at the hospital, after Conor has spoken his truth, he's able to accept that his mom is going to die.
That must be such a difficult but also freeing realization.
It is. He knows he loves her, and he understands that her suffering will soon be over.
The monster has helped him reach a place of peace amidst all the grief.
A Monster Calls explores some really big themes.
Like what?
Well, one of the biggest is how we deal with sadness, grief, and loss.
Right. It shows that it's okay to feel all sorts of emotions: anger, confusion, guilt, even wanting the pain to stop.
And having those feelings doesn't make you a bad person.
Exactly. The book validates those messy emotions, especially for a young person who might not have the words to express them or who feels pressure to hide them.
And another important theme is the importance of honesty.
Okay.
Conor tries to keep his feelings bottled up.
Yeah.
But the book shows that being honest, even when it's hard, is a crucial step towards healing.
It's like Connor's whole journey is about overcoming his fear of the truth.
Right, and once he faces that truth, he can finally start to move forward.
Powerful stuff.
And there's this idea that it's okay to not be okay.
So important.
Conor learns that it's not weak to admit that you're struggling.
It's actually brave.
Yeah, and by accepting his sadness, his anger, his fear, he can begin to heal.
The book really normalizes those feelings,
It does.
which is so important, especially for young people.
And even though Conor feels isolated, the book reminds us that we're not always alone. Support can come from unexpected places like Lily trying to be his friend, or his grandmother showing she cares, or even the monster.
So even when it feels like there's no one there for you?
There might be someone even if it's not who you expect.
I like that.
And of course, the power of stories is a huge theme in the book.
For sure.
The monster stories aren't just simple fairy tales.
Right.
They're complex and layered, and they help Conor see the world and his own emotions in a new light.
They give him a different perspective.
And they show him that there aren't always easy answers or clear-cut good guys and bad guys.
Life is messy.
It is. And these stories prepare Conor to deal with that messiness.
Very cool.
It's interesting to compare A Monster Calls to other stories that deal with similar themes.
Okay.
Like Harry Potter, for example.
Yeah.
It deals with loss, but it doesn't really focus on the raw intensity of sadness in the same way.
So A Monster Calls is more grounded in that real-life experience of grief?
I think so.
Interesting.
And there are some similarities to movies like The Babadook and Inside Out.
Okay.
They also use fantasy to explore big emotions like grief and anger.
It's a powerful way to approach those topics.
And the idea of a monster telling stories to impart wisdom is kind of like Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah. Although the focus in A Monster Calls is more on coping with loss.
Right.
So many interesting connections.
For anyone who wants to explore similar stories,
Yeah.
there are some great recommendations out there.
Like what?
The Red Magician, Coraline, When You Call My Name, History Is All You Left Me, and The World Between the Rain.
Lots of great options.
So now let's talk about the author Patrick Ness.
Okay.
He was born in America, but he's lived in London since 1999.
Okay.
He's written a lot of amazing books like the Chaos Walking trilogy,
Yeah, that's a popular one.
and he's won tons of awards.
He's a really talented writer.
And the story behind A Monster Calls is really special.
Oh, how so?
The idea actually came from another author, Siobhan Dowd,
Okay.
but she sadly passed away before she could write it.
Oh, that's so sad.
So Patrick Ness took on the project with the goal of writing the book that Siobhan would have wanted.
That's a beautiful tribute.
It really adds a personal layer to the story.
It does.
And just for fun, here are a few facts about Patrick Ness.
Okay.
He has a rhinoceros tattoo.
No way.
Yeah, he's run 2 marathons,
Wow.
and he hates onions.
Really?
It's always interesting to learn about the people behind the books we love.
It makes them feel more real.
So to sum it all up, A Monster Calls is an incredibly moving and thought-provoking story.
It definitely stays with you.
It takes us on this deeply personal journey with Conor as he faces the reality of his mom's illness,
Right.
and the monster with its stories, and Conor's own act of telling the truth. They help Conor understand grief and honesty and the importance of accepting all of his feelings, even the difficult ones.
It's a powerful message.
And even though the book deals with sadness, it ultimately offers hope and the possibility of healing.
It does.
It shows how vulnerability and stories can help us get through tough times.
Beautifully said.
And we can't forget the amazing illustrations by Jim Kay.
They add so much to the story.
They really bring it to life.
They do.
So as you think about A Monster Calls, I want you to consider how your own difficult emotions might show up in unexpected ways.
Okay.
And think about the stories you've encountered in your life that have helped you understand difficult truths.
That's a great prompt.
What role has truth played in your own challenges, and what does it mean to truly accept all of your feelings, even the ones that make you uncomfortable?
Lots to ponder.
That's all from us this time, folks. Thanks for listening.
Until next time.
Bye.